Hello, friends, and welcome back to another edition of Real Talks, where every movie I talk about, new or old, ignites a conversation. I'm your host, David Steele, today. Join me on this cinematic journey as I turn back the clock and talk in depth about some of the greatest films of all time. Before we get started today, I really wanted to say thank you to everybody who's been commenting on the SAG video I put out. I wasn't expecting the amount of feedback I was getting, but this is what it's all about, right? Starting a conversation. I'm trying to build a community with you guys to actually have you guys come every single day and be able so you guys can have a respectful and nice conversation about film. So, all that being said, let's get started with today's video. So, I'm going to be talking about a film here that was just recently released a few years ago. Okay, and the sequel's right around the corner. And there's been a huge buzz about it. Okay, and I'm talking about Dune. So Dune is one of those movies that just came out a couple of years ago, and it was actually right during the beginning of the pandemic. So I was lucky enough to see it in IMAX. Anyways, um, so basically, as I said, I'm going to be talking about a film that was released a couple of years ago, and the sequel's right around the corner. So Dune Part 2 is going to be releasing actually nationwide on Friday, but for sneak previews, it's going to be tomorrow. I know some of you guys probably actually ended up seeing it on Sunday, so that's great, and the feedback has been tremendous about it. So if you're not familiar with Dune, let me catch up. A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Oh wait, no. Sorry, guys. I had the wrong science fiction story. We have to go even further back, okay? All the way back to 1967, when American author Frank Herbert first published Dune, okay? The first of 6 original novels transporting us to Arrakis, the most dangerous planet in the world and the universe, and the only source of the most valuable substance in the universe, which is spice. A drug which extends human life and provides accelerated levels of thought. The debut novel and film really is going to follow the many adventures of Paul Atreides, a gifted and young man whose destiny is beyond his understanding yet. And what I'm going to do, guys, is I'm going to really talk to you guys. Once I go through everything, I'm going to really talk to you guys about the similarities. Because, I just kiddingly brought up Star Wars, but when you break it down, this is just, if you had never seen or heard about Dune before, you just sat down and watched like the 1984 version or whatever, you'd be like, oh my God, this is Star Wars. So I'm going to break down to you guys the similarities of like Dune and Star Wars, but that's going to be much later. So sadly, in 1986, we did lose Frank Herbert, and we lost him pretty young. Okay, he was 65. Okay, and he passed away, but that doesn't mean his stories stopped. So his son, actually ended up having 3 children, and Brian is really carried on his legacy, and so he would be carrying on his legacy. And as a matter of fact, guys, he was an executive producer on not only Dune, but he's going to be an executive producer on Dune Part 2 as well. So he would be carrying on his legacy, authoring many prequels and sequels in collaboration with Kevin J. Anderson. A few years prior to that, a few years prior to his death, one of the films or one of the novels that would be adapted was Dune. And I can't believe I'm even saying this, but it was 40 years ago. 40 years ago. Yes, 40 years ago. And that was, so who you see there is Kyle MacLachlan and Sting. And that was directed by David Lynch. Ironically, and you guys aren't looking at that wrong, that is Patrick Stewart in the background. So Patrick Stewart, one of his earliest gigs before he ended up, everybody knows him from, being a British actor and everything else. Before he got the role of Jean-Luc Picard, he was in feature films. And one of the feature films that he ended up doing was Dune. So that was released in 1984. So over the course of several years, Dune actually had many related video games that would be released. The last one coming in 2001. So let's fast forward 20 years. Okay. It's now 2021. And this is a property that is, well, I mean, let's face it, it's known, but it's not that well known, right? It's what I call a, quote, second level story. It's so deep and rich in all of its characters and the battles and everything else. And there's so many themes to this, a lot of which is, correlated with Star Wars. And once again, we'll get into that later on. And by the way, guys, if you want to really touch upon or look at movies in that kind of way, I'm just starting, and it just did start a new series in the chill. It's called Anatomy of a Movie, and I'll leave the little description link up there for you guys to check out. Excuse me. So I've done 2 videos so far. Okay, I've done one on Rounders, and I've done one on Silence of the Lambs. And what I'm doing is basically walking you through the themes of each of the films and telling you how they apply in that kind of way. So that's all about themes. So getting back to Dune. So we fast forward 20 years. It's now 2021. And the visionary director behind such movies is Arrival, Sicario, and Blade Runner 2049. And yes, I'm talking about Denis Villeneuve. Denis Villeneuve has now co-written and directed a new entry along with Eric Roth. The same guy, of course, he wrote one of the Best Picture nominee, Forrest Gump. And he also wrote The Insider. Most recently, he did Killers of the Flower Moon with Martin Scorsese. And John Spates. So John Spates did Doctor Strange. For a film of this epic scale, okay, you're going to need an epic cast, okay? And that's exactly what this has. This has an absolutely epic cast. And so let's talk about who we have here, okay? We have, of course, Timothée Chalamet, okay, playing Paul Atreides. We've got Zendaya as Shani, Rebecca Ferguson as Lady Jessica. And don't forget, guys, this was right around the time, Mission Impossible was being done. So she's, at this point, she's red hot at this point. Okay. She's in 2 huge movies. Okay. Oscar Isaac, of course. Duke Leto Atreides as Paul's father. Jason Momoa, okay, as Duncan Idaho. Javier Bardem, okay, as Stelgard. Josh Brolin is Gurney, and Stellar Stendegaard as a villainous Baron. Now, that's a huge lineup. Of course, Stendegaard has done, playing Pennywise, and he's done other roles. Brolin, of course, one of his biggest things. Of course, he was in Sicario. He worked with Denis in Sicario. But so this was pretty big, and so I found a little snippet he did during an interview, and this is what he said about working with Denis Villeneuve.
Come on. Oh, man. Having worked with Denis before, I think it was something that he thought that I wouldn't do for whatever reason. And when he offered it to me, he said, I'll send you the script. And I said, no need, because I just had a feeling, first of all, and it was Denis second of all. And then it turned out that it was going to be a lot of work. So I had to deal with that. It was very, very, very physical, and I wasn't necessarily in the best shape at that point. But then when you're in a place like outside of Abu Dhabi, there's a different feeling because we were surrounded by 100 kilometers in every direction of nothing but sand, and my body changed. So it was like everything that you have or that I had planned for the movie suddenly became a moot point. It started taking on its own life.
And that's pretty interesting in itself. And so he plays Gurney, and it is really a cool character, okay? Kind of like a mentor who's showing him how to fight and everything else. And so that was really good to see. Stendegaard was awesome as the Baron. He was amazing. And and how they were able to do that. Now I'm going to get into all of the costume stuff and everything else. Now, a little bit about this, okay? And I did this with 42, and I got some positive feedback. What I'm going to do is I used to bore you guys with the pre-production and the casting and all that. Some of this stuff is definitely relevant, okay? So others is not so much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you guys some of the stuff, okay? And because this is a big, big production, okay? And that being said, I'm also going to tell you some of the stuff that was very important, because otherwise, that being so, a little bit of background, okay? This movie ended up winning 6 Oscars, and actually was the big winner at the Oscars that night. And the reason why I'm going to go into depth about some of this stuff is because when you see how it's done, you'll understand why it won the Oscar. One cinematography and one production design and one editing, score with Hans Zimmer. He's a legend in himself. Visual effects and sound. So I'm going to talk about really the costumes and the sound and the visual effects in depth, but we're going to wait on that for a little bit. So back to that. So so that was your characters. Okay. So we're on the precipice right now of Dune 2, as I said, which I'm going to be going to see tomorrow. And don't forget, guys, okay, I am going to be doing a spoiler cast on that. So you guys want to come back here, I'm going to hope to do it Thursday night. The show's at 3. I'm going to hopefully do it around 7 o'clock Pacific Standard, 10 Eastern. So if you guys want to come back here, you can definitely check that out. And so we actually have a couple of new additions to the cast. Okay, we've got Best Actor nominee, Austin Butler. The incomparable Christopher Walken is going to be in this, which is fantastic. Florence Pugh and Lee Sedol. So I'm going to be, as I said, I'm going to be doing a full-blown spoiler cast on this when the time comes. So right now, today, I'm going to be focusing on the first film. And as I said, I'm going to be doing I'm going to be doing it a little bit differently for you guys. I am going to touch upon the the visual effects and the costumes, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you guys what I enjoyed, what I didn't really enjoy, and the overall thoughts of the film. And then what I'm going to do, guys, is I'm going to talk to you about the similarities of Star Wars and Dune, because there are a lot of similarities. Okay, so let's get started right off the top. So this is very much a coming-of-age story. And this is very similar to Star Wars with Luke Skywalker and Paul Atreides. The beginning uniforms, right off the top, which we see in the first 5 minutes, are very similar to that of Star Wars. Okay? And we learn early on what Paul's powers are. So that being said, we know what that is, and we're also given a voiceover from Zendaya about what the spice is and why that's important. So, costumes. Why are the costumes? The costumes were amazing. So there were over 1,000 looks for Arrakis, Cauldron, and Gia Prime, which was designed by the team for the film. The costume design was done by Jacqueline West and Bob Morgan. Villeneuve told West that he wanted the costumes to be, quote, grounded in history, end quote, in history, while instructing them to avoid conventional futuristic views used in science fiction films, and put emphasis on giving a philosophical atmosphere to the film. West performed, quote, psychological studies of the characters and digging into their past for symbolic analogs to the various houses' identity. So this aided her in the creation of her costumes, Her design was primarily inspired by the Middle Ages and what she envisioned it would look like in the future, using the term medieval to describe her approach to designing the costumes. She found similarities between the Freemen and the French Resistance and the Baron's army, okay? What was basically called the, quote, Nazis of the universe. That's their term, not mine. So you could definitely see the overall structure and how this was done. And it was very material. It was very like military, okay? And that was a big thing, okay? So let's move on, okay? And visual effects. Now, as I said, it's just one visual effects. That's why I'm touching on this, okay? DNEG, and that's the house, the effects house, contributed to over 28 scenes of the film and created 1,200 visual effects shots out of the 1,700 total. So you're talking about almost 80% of the shots were done by this one house, with vendors including Wiley Company and Rodeo FX. Many shots were various chroma key process. Visual effects supervisor Paul Lambert used, quote, sand screens, end quote, for filming scenes in Arrakis instead of using green screen background. Now, the visual effects team used sand-colored ones that matched the establishing desert shots intended for the backgrounds. The sand screens were used in capturing scenes of the Ornithopter hopper. Okay, now that is the helicopter, if you will, and that actually I'll touch upon that. I mean, that looks a lot like an X-wing fighter too. Another reference to Star Wars, with the visual effects team using the helicopter footage and replacing them with the actual models. This made the sand displacement such when it landed and taken off easier to capture. This was also filmed by encapsulating the helicopter models in a black box with fans blowing around it. The wings were inserted with CGI, okay, and similar processes were used to film scenes in Caldedan, such by creating gray screens and those with a, quote, slightly blue tint for filming interior and exterior scenes, respectively. Now, the blue screens were used for other scenes as well. He clarified that some different colored screens were used based on the imagery in the foreground and the background, which made compositing them easier. The resulting shots also appeared more natural than the chroma key. Approximately 18 tons of sand and dust were used on set, and the team created the effect of blowing sand using a V8 engine with a fan on the background of a tractor. So that tells you something. Now, the sandworms were created by CGI. So the sandworms are another little wrinkle that they used during Dune. Okay, now you can see the comparison there. On the right, we have Empire Strikes Back, okay? And on the left, we have Dune. So the sandworms, okay, were created through CGI. And the visual effects team found it a lot of difficulty in deciding how the sandworms would move. The team spent over a year figuring out the movement of the sandworm and researched the body of movements of various animals such as worms and snakes. The sand ripples created by the worms were inspired by Jaws, of course, the 1975 classic by Steven Spielberg. The special effects supervisor designed a vibrating 8x8 foot steel plate and then vibrated the plate under the sand. This resulted in the formation of various patterns, using to signify an approaching sandworm. The vibrating areas were also layered to enhance it, to cover a larger area. The team initially considered using rigging explosives to capture the movement of the sandworms breaking the surface into the desert, but rejected the idea as it was impractical to perform in the Middle East. Instead, they used the Houdini software to have the sand emulate the motion of water. Denis Villeneuve did not want the associated sound design to appear as a studio production. Sound designers Mark Menegai and Theo Green used a, quote, fake documentary realism angle approach to natural sounds and manipulate them for use in the screen, for use in the film, recording this sounds such as shifting sands in Death Valley using hydrophones. Now, the Montreal and Vancouver facilities of DNAG were used for the Iraqi invasion scene. So that's when the Harkin basically go down. So the mother meets with the Baron, okay? And the Baron she's having the conversation with him. And what ends up happening is that basically she's betraying them and says, look, that they're under my care. Okay. So let them die with honor or let them be exiled. So he says, fine, I'm not going to attack. I'm not going to kill them. Okay. But the attack is going to happen. Okay. So that being said, it involved a combination of practical effects and digital effects. The visual effects supervisor of the Montreal team, Brian Connor, created a digital spaceport, while the Vancouver team was tasked with simulating explosions. Practical explosions filmed in Budapest backlots were later enhanced by the visual effects team. Excuse me. As the special effects team had rigs of practical lighting shining through the fog of the practical explosions, this allowed the visual effects team to then blend them with the practical and digital shots together very easily. Lambert created the same visual effects for the shields by combining the past and the future frames by experimenting with a clip from the 1954 film The Seventh Samurai, which resulted in a shimmering look. Denis Villeneuve approved and they used. They also added color. They used blue for when an object bounces and red when it penetrates. The scene when Paul's future vision was filmed was using mocap. Okay, and that's basically, you put on these, as Josh called them, a onesie, okay, with all these little dots, and that's how that's filmed. Like, you take a video game like The Last of Us Part 2, that was done all in mocap. And that's why it looks so good. And the team replicated the mocaps to hundreds of the fighters in the scenes. Animation supervisor Robert Lumden helped create the scene as the team didn't know much about mocap. They also added explosions in the foreground, sandworms in the background, sand displacement throughout the scene, and used more simulations to render the scene in real time. To create the desert bounce, okay, the little thing that Paul sees, and it's just the sweat's coming off the ears, the team created a detailed, practically stuffed model and filmed it in Jordan on the appropriate desert lighting. The animation teams used footage of animals idling as reference and animated the mouse so that it, quote, only expends effort when absolutely necessary, end quote. The bush hologram in the film was created by projecting different slices of the light onto Chalamet's face during plate photography, based on his position on the set using a projector. Wiley then completed the scene by adding the holograph around him. For the Huntress Secret scene, so that's the thing that comes into the room trying to kill Paul, the team used a stick-on set as a reference and then later replaced it with the proper models via CGI. Practical rigs were attached to Stegard's body to create the illusion of the Baron's levitation. We see that a couple times, and it's really actually very cool. Sometimes the levitation was done practically using a seesaw rig. However, the suspender device only attached to his back was inserted by CGI. So that, I wanted to go through that because a couple of those things are very important. And when you have, when you win an Oscar for visual effects, it's like, how is this done type of thing. And I wanted to explain some of the things that they did because it was very, very cool. Okay. So now that I got through all the boring stuff, let me tell you guys what I actually thought about the movie. So let's go to the good stuff. Okay. Let me tell you what I enjoyed about the film. Okay. So once again, the costume design was very elaborate and well done. And I just went through all the costume design, and it was just unbelievable how it was done and the inspirations it had and how it was done, and everything else. The knife work, the training scenes between Paul and Gurney were very fluid and well done. So when you're doing fighting scenes, you have to have a stunt coordinator, and the choreography has to be fluid, and that's what this is. I believe that they were actually going hand to hand and really doing that well. Great. There was a fantastic job of building the tension while having. So there's a scene where there's a sandworm coming, and they're trying to get all the 21 people on the ship. And it was a great job of building the tension with having to save the crew, with first doing the background, okay, of what it is. So somebody's talking to the dupe about what exactly it is, what's being done with this, or how it brings spice and everything else. Okay. And then you have the conflict happen. So we just don't dive right into it. Okay. Also, not seeing the worm was definitely building tension along with the score. Hans Zimmer, his score was fabulous in this movie. So the background information by the voiceover from Zendaya right in the first 5 minutes of the film. So you know why spice is important. That was key. They could have left it for a little later, but they wanted to make sure everybody understood why it was important. The major bat sequence that happened, okay, the visual effects, and I just went over them, and there, you could see why it won an Oscar, right? It was fantastic. I mean, just having to overlay all of these different things and taking, using different screens and everything else, it was unbelievable. I really like that. The acting, okay, the acting was very good. Okay, it was quality stuff. So you could tell that immediately. Okay, Oscar Isaac, Rebecca Ferguson, and Timothy Chalamet were on board with this. Okay, and they did a fantastic job. And there was a whole thing about casting. I wasn't going to read it to you guys, but when people started to come on board, they started to really do that. And then, once again, you go back to the cast and it's stacked, right? I mean, you have Oscar Isaac, you have Zendaya, you have Timothy Chalamet, you have Rebecca Ferguson, you have Dave Bautista. Okay, not to mention you have, a Josh Brolin in there. So I mean, you definitely have the pedigree for it. Okay, I'm not even talking about Javier Bardem. Okay, so and Jason Momoa plays, not a pivotal role, but he plays a role for a small amount of time. So, what did I notice immediately? Okay, as I said at the very beginning, right off the top, this is very much of a coming of an age story. Okay, there is a lot of comparisons. I won't say a lot of comparisons. There definitely could be comparisons to Star Wars once again, and Luke and Paul. Okay, Luke is a boy on a desert planet, and you have Paul Atreides, who's trying to find his way. I mean, the setting, right? The setting is in the middle of the desert. So there's something to be said there. Then you have, as I said, they're both boys. Okay. Now we don't know anything about Luke's father at this point, but we definitely know about the Duke. So it was very much a coming of age story. And when Paul kills when he kills that man, and he had never killed anybody, he then becomes a boy to a man. So that was the first thing I noticed. Lady Jessica, when she brings Paul to the Reverend Mother to test his powers, the conversation they have after that, okay, it's in a gray background symbolizing Paul is the one. And it's really uncertain at that point, right? And it could be comparison to Star Wars, with Luke being the chosen one. And that was about half hour in. Once again, really uncertainty and everything else. The Dragonfly choppers, very futuristic looking, and then when the wings are spread, okay, they look exactly like X-wings. Okay. Now you got to remember, guys, this is 19. This was well before. This is after Star Wars. Okay, so you can see a lot of similarities there. Once again, the uniforms at the very beginning resemble those of the stormtroopers. Okay, and early on, we find out what Paul's powers are with the voice. Okay, it's very much like the Force, right? So you're seeing a lot of similarities here. Now, a couple of other similarities. Okay, you have Baron Harkin, okay, and Darth Vader. I mean, both villains that are equally horrible, right? We don't know anything about, both of them, but it's one of those things we know they're evil. So we have the thinking machines and the droids. I mean, the Force and the Spice is another. I talked about the stormtrooper-like military type of thing. We have the Cry Knights and the lightsabers. Okay, I could go on and on and on and on. Okay, we have the Emperor, and then we're going to have the Emperor in this particular one. Cosmic, it's set in the middle of space. So there is a lot to be said here. I mean, I've gone through a few of them. Okay, and so what did I did not? So that's what I liked about the movie. Okay, what didn't I like about the movie? The biggest thing for me, okay, was the marketing. Anybody who has seen the trailers for this, now, I like trailers. I love watching trailers and everything else. That all being said, a good trailer, okay, the first one is supposed to get your interest peaked. The second one is supposed to give you a little bit of a story. And the third one is supposed to give you what it is. A trailer should never be more than 240, 245 at max. These were almost 3 minutes plus. Okay. And it gave way too much of the film away, in my opinion. It was just too much for 3 minutes. So I have to go back and look at this, but the last time I read this, according to the MPA, the Motion Picture Association, you could only have one trailer per year from one studio that was over 3 minutes. Okay, now they decided to do this one. I think it was too long. And the other thing, too, is this. And by the way, it wasn't just that first trailer. Every single trailer was over 3 minutes. So that really kind of did something. I mean, it was a lot of the same shots, but still, it was too long, in my opinion. The other thing that it really made you believe, and when you went to go see it, you thought Zendaya was in this movie. Much more than she was. I mean, she was in little flashbacks, but we only see her with about 20 minutes left, I think. So I think that, she shows up, okay, with about 20 minutes left in the film, and finally says her first line. We see her through visions, but nothing substantial. So that I thought was questionable, to say the least. And I understand they were trying to save her and everything else, but at the same time, okay. But yeah, so Zendaya only being in there 20 minutes, she's going to be much more prominent in the second part, I would imagine. But overall, I thought I enjoyed the movie. Okay, the visual effects were awesome, hence they won an Oscar. The score was terrific by Hans Zimmer, incredible, and the acting was very good. So I have no problems with that. It was a good, solid movie. It's a deep second level type of movie, so you have to really pay attention. So I'm very eager to see Dune Part 2 and see where it goes from there. Once again, as I keep reiterating, a lot of similarities in between that and Star Wars, and themes and certain scenes and everything else. So, you know, it was a good movie though. It was a solid movie. Very difficult to make. I can only imagine. So I'm really curious to see what Dune 2 looks like, and I can't wait to see it. So, I mean, everything I touched upon, really, I'm really curious to see where this is going to go for next Oscar season. I mean, I know, the Oscars in 2 weeks, but I'm really curious to see where it goes for the next Oscar season. So that will be interesting. So yeah, that's about it. That's Dune. So a couple of things, guys. First and foremost, if you so we got a lot of things coming up. First, tomorrow I'm going to be going to see Dune 2. The plan is to try and do a spoiler cast tomorrow night. Okay. So, and if you miss the spoiler cast tomorrow night, the stream, don't worry, it'll be out Saturday. So I want everybody to get a chance to see it and then, bring their things in there. If you like this, and like I said earlier, I mean, look at what's going on with the SAGs video. I mean, that blows me away. Put your comments down in the comment section. What did you like about Dune? What didn't you like about Dune? Are you excited for Dune 2? Who's your favorite character? All that stuff, guys. We have the Oscars less than 2 weeks away. So Matthew Anderson is going to be coming back and doing another prediction show. This will be the second, annual Real Talks Oscar prediction show. And we're going to be talking about who we think is going to win and who deserves to win. And then we have that on the horizon. And then, of course, March is right around the corner. Of course, Marvel March. That's what we're going to do here on the channel. So I'm going to talk about all of Marvel movies. That's it. All of March. So I'm going to give you guys the really good ones to start, like Infinity War, Civil War, the Avengers, all those. And then I'm going to go into deeper other stuff. And that way you guys can, So the third week in March, I'm working all week. So you guys are going to be getting videos pretty much every day. So the other thing too is, guys, since I want to thank everybody for, everybody that just subscribed to the channel, I want to say thank you. And by the way, guys, hit that like and subscribe button. Okay, like those new people just did, because we don't want you missing one video. So here's the thing. Here is my membership page. Okay, the reason why I bring this up, guys, is because it's completely free for you the first month. Okay, I made this as cheap as possible, even when you have got to pay. So $2.99 a month for the basic membership. It's less than a cup of coffee at Starbucks. Okay, $6.99 is the middle level, and $10 a month. That is my biggest level. I have, one of my most faithful and honorable members, and one of the only members I have is Deadpool. And Deadpool, he just re-upped for 7 months. And, I thank him, and I thank him nonstop all the time, because he believes in me. And that's what I want you guys to do, guys, is believe in me. Believe in me that I'm going to give you the best content possible, movie-related and everything else. I'm talking about the Perfect Movie Series. I'm talking about Anatomy of a Movie. I'm talking about retrospectives. I'm talking about interviews when I can get them. I'm always doing things to try and get this channel going. My goal by the end of this year, okay, is to have, hopefully, my goal is to have 2,000 subscribers, hashtag road to 2,000, and 15 to 20 paid memberships. And I want you guys to be there with me. And I'm not asking a lot, okay? $10 a month. Netflix just raised their prices the other day. And, a lot of that stuff on there is crap. I'm gonna be honest. I don't like Netflix at all. I'm not putting any of this stuff behind a paywall. None of it. So, that tells you something. I could very easily put some of these series behind a paywall and make you pay for it, but I won't do that. Because I want you guys to have the absolute best content out there. So, all of that being said, guys, if you would like to become a member, please subscribe. Okay, subscribe to get a membership. Okay, and that would be fantastic. It would help me out because I'm trying to do this on a full-time basis. And yeah, and that's it. I think that's about gonna do it for today. So it's one of those things, guys, where I'm trying to give you guys the best stuff out there, and anybody else will tell you that. So that's Dune. Okay. Come back. I'm gonna go see Dune 2 tomorrow afternoon. Okay. 3:00. So hopefully my goal is to have like a 7:00 or 8:00 stream. I'll tweet you guys with my first reaction. By the way, guys, if you want to, follow me on Twitter, I'm always in spaces talking about movies or retweeting stuff about movies. Hit me up on Twitter. We can definitely talk there, or I'm hosting spaces occasionally. So, okay. So that is going to do it for today. Thank you, everybody that's going to watch. And do the 3 things you need to do always. Be safe, be careful, and have a great rest of the day. And I am David Steele, and you have been watching Real Talks. Bye-bye, guys.